Hello everyone and welcome to the first of hopefully many videos of our community chats. I'm joined here with the Age of Nagash.
Hi guys, this is Age of Nagash here. It's great to be speaking to you. We thought myself and the Great Book of Grudges. We thought we'd do some joint videos together, and of course that the Great Book of Grudges is dedicated primarily to Warhammer Fantasy and doesn't talk about Age of Sigma. And my channel is a channel that I do start my videos saying it is dedicated to Age of Sigma. However, I started talking to the Nathan here regarding perhaps doing some joint videos. And this is because one of the things that I love about Warhammer, and it's the reason that got me into Warhammer as a child, was just seeing like the rank and file of the models and just seeing the massive armies was amazing. And also all the lore behind it as well. I just absolutely soaked it up. And I had to take a break from Warhammer when I was a kid until about 4 years ago. And when I went back into a Games Workshop after such a long time, I was like, right, I've been checking up on the lore lately, not Age of Sigmar because I was unaware of that. But I was like, yes, I love this, and I really wanted to do a Vampire Count army. So I went into my Games Workshop, and I got told that basically the world that was, as it's called, had been destroyed. The old world was no more, and now is Age of Sigmar. And I won't lie to you guys, my heart sort of sank just a little bit, just because I loved the lore and just being told that it was all being destroyed, especially how looking forward to it I was going back into it. So then I sort of looked at the lore that there was in Age of Sigmar, because I was quite like, okay, that's fine. I've had a demo game of Age of Sigmar. It was very easy for me to get back into it after having a break for so long. So I bought back into it, but I was like, okay, I'm going to read up the lore here. And at the start of Age of Sigmar, there was like really no lore. And the thing what really frustrated me is that the lore they had between Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar was sort of what bridged them together, was just like was basically like a really abstract paragraph that was so abstract it just didn't make any sense. It involved like Sigma holding on to the old core of the old world and a space dragon having pity for him. That's basically the summary of it. So yes, basically, yeah, it goes worse. But anyway, so now in Age of Sigmar, there is not as much as established lore as there was in Warhammer Fantasy. And you have to understand that's because Warhammer Fantasy had been going for a lot longer. But they have came up with lore for the main armies in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So it has definitely got a lot better than it was. However, there are a lot of armies that still need love, like what happened to the High Elves in Age of Sigmar now compared to how big of an army they were in Fantasy. That's the same with, like the dwarves, the almost like, the orcs and goblins, the the dark elves, the Skaven, all of these, the Empire, the list goes on. All these armies that really sort of haven't been given any love since Age of Sigmar. And at the start, I was like, that's okay. Age of Sigmar's brand new, let's give it time. It's been about 4 years now, guys. So still early days in the long term of things. But I thought it would be really, really nice for me to try and give some love to these smaller armies. And that's what I've been starting to do on my channel. Like I'm doing a basically Warriors of Chaos videos at the moment. And I thought it would be really amazing for these armies that don't have much lore in Age of Sigmar to contact Nathan here from the Great Book of Grudges. Has been watching his lore videos now for quite a few months, and I can really tell that Nathan knows what he's talking about in the old world, and he knows. What I really liked about your videos, Nathan, is that you've gone into, anyone can sort of talk about the broad aspects of the fantasy of Warhammer. You've gone into like nice little details about unique characters, which some people haven't might not have heard of, and it's really nice and in depth. And I thought it'd be great to enlist your help in trying to give these loves for these armies that we really like. The High Elves. I mean, I say I really like the High Elves, and don't call me anything nasty if I say that. But the armies that we really love, like the Skaven, shall we say?
Yeah.
It'll be nice to give them that love best as we can for the for particularly for people who are coming into Warhammer. And if you're coming into Warhammer now, and you're probably going to a Games Workshop and you'll say, oh, what's going on? What's all this and stuff? And then you'll get faced with what Warhammer Fantasy is today, which is Age of Sigmar. And like I say, there are some faults with Age of Sigmar, but I still like the game. I'm not going to step away from that. However, if someone says, oh, I really like these, they don't know what they're called, so I really like these rat things. And there's like, what can you tell me about that? And they say it to the manager, and it's like, Oh, there's not really much story out for them yet, I'm afraid. How about you like these Sigma Marines ones instead? So that's why I thought it'd be really nice for me and Nathan to maybe in the future see how things go, and maybe try and collect and start building a archive for all these armies that we love and are in desperate need of some, basically just some treatment and just some content in general, just to flesh them out and really show our love for them. So I hope that you'd be happy to do that, Nathan. Is that something you would be up for? I know I've been talking quite a long time now, so I thought
No,
I'd
definitely.
like to.
Definitely. The fact is, like, people who know me know that I'm not the greatest fan of Age of Sigmar. It's my heart is firmly placed in the old world. I love the old gods. I love the old armies. But there is a gap, and I have spoken to many Age of Sigmar fans that do want to know about fantasy, and I realize it has to be a two-way street. And these types of things are really cool. If we can have, like, yourself and myself together talking about these things and showing that there's a bridge, your example being the Skaven, you know, a lot of people just go, oh yeah, they're servants of chaos. It's like, but many people don't know that the Horned Rat actually didn't want to join chaos. Skaven and the Skaven themselves, they just wanted to pretty much ally with Archeon just out of convenience, and then they were going to eat him. Like it was stated, they were going to try and eat him. The Horned Rat wanted to eat the 4 Chaos Gods. So there's a lot of things that have changed. Now he's the 5th god, which is interesting considering that, let's face it, in fantasy, there were a lot of Chaos Gods. But now they're just footnotes. I believe they were mentioned in a Age of Sigmar book recently. I think it was in reference to Hashut, the god of the Chaos Dwarves, or it might have actually been the Chaos Gods of Lore. But like, people want to know these things. People are interested in the story, and there is a bridge between, like you said, you know, Sigmar was flying about in space and time. Dragon came around and said, "Oh, that's a pretty necklace," and then made him a god for some reason. So people need to see the distinction. There are a lot of Age of Sigmar fans that they're coming in, they want established worlds, and they're not seeing an established world when there actually is.
I completely agree with you, and it's nice to hear that you've got the same thoughts to me. And it's yeah, and it's also, you know, like people really want to go in depth in the lore, and it's also if you go into if you're like me when I was a kid anyway, I was, you know, I went into the Games Workshop, I loved the models, and I also wanted to know the story behind them as well. I was very much all about the background. And I know today, if I was a kid and I went into a Games Workshop and I went into a store and I say, oh, I really like these models here. I don't know, let's say I look at what's called the Dispossessed now, which are the old fantasy dwarfs, and pick up a box of these. It's like, oh, I really want to know about them, all that sort of thing. And it's like, there's not really too much to them, and they're not really mentioned in Age of Sigmar. And then it's a little bit like let down. It's like, well, have they got, you know, a book out yet? And it's like, no, they don't have their own army book yet. And it's like, oh, okay, well, when's that going to happen? Oh, I don't. And this is the manager talking. It's like, oh, I don't know. And so, and that's honest, you know, they don't know when things are going to get updated. And it's like, oh, well, that's a bit sad, because, you know, I like these guys and my friend likes those ones, and his ones have had like 4 bloody army books since Age of Sigmar came out. So it'd just be nice to give that lore to the people who really need it, because there's some people who I have no doubt that play Warhammer and they don't care about the lore. They like the models. There's some people who just paint the models. They don't even play the game. But I think for people like me and Nathan, I'm sure quite a few people listening to this as well, we sort of like, it's not that we want the lore, we sort of feel like we need it to sort of sustain our, you know, like why I really like a certain army. It's like the vampire counts, why I really like them. Nagash, why I really like Nagash. Sure, Nagash in the game, in fantasy, I have no doubt, and in Age of Sigmar, he's a beast. He's amazing. He's basically a one-man army. But that's not why I really like him. And also his model's amazing. That's not why, you know, I bought him. I also bought him because I love his lore. And he has recently had a bit of a lore update in Age of Sigmar. But I believe there's also a bit in Age of Sigmar where I heard that basically Nagash, when he died and he was brought back to, I don't want to say brought back to life, but brought back to undeath by Sigmar in Age of Sigmar. And when he was
wait. Sigmar brings back Nagash.
Yeah, it sounded like a good idea at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, he brought him back, and then apparently, like, I remember reading somewhere that And when I say I remember reading somewhere, it's not because I haven't got the best memory. It's because the lore in the early days of Age of Sigmar is very abstract. And I remember reading somewhere that Nagash had forgotten what happened before he was brought back to undeath by Age of Sigmar. Sorry, not Age of Sigmar, by Sigmar. And I think I remember hearing that. And it's like, well, if he's forgotten who he used to be, I don't know if that's complete canon, but like I said, I think I remember hearing it. Then that's taken a massive part out of his character. And I'm sure Nathan, you could tell me so much about Nagash, couldn't you? Like what it was like in the old world and stuff, and fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up doing a 47-minute video, and that was just based before the end times. Like, if I would have included the end times too, it would have been easily 2 hours. Nagash himself is one of the oldest characters, I would say living, but let's face it, he's not. But, he was alive thousands of years before Sigmar was even born as a human. Many people don't even know Sigmar was actually a human man.
Yeah, he just wandered off, didn't he? And he became a god. And people worshipped him. That's probably really a brief of what actually happened.
Yeah, but essentially, that's the right thing. Like Sigmar was a great man. He was a leader of a barbarian tribe. He eventually founded the empire. So he became a god. They worshipped him. It's the whole thing with chaos magic. If you believe enough, it will happen. But like, many people don't know these. They just think, oh, Sigmar is god. Same thing with Nagash. No, Nagash was a man. He was a priest. Like he wasn't even like, yeah, he was the son of a king, but he was not fit to rule. He was actually born just to lead the mortuary cult, to find the secrets to immortality. The thing is, Nagash, in a very easy way of explaining it, was kind of a bit of a spoiled brat, and he wanted to rule instead of his brother.
Yeah. I know. It's like, wasn't he the first man, human to study necromancy by some? Didn't he get taught it by some dark elves that he tortured or something along those lines? I can't.
They taught him how to wield the winds of magic, because the Nehakarans themselves, which are the people who became the Tomb Kings, they got their power directly from their pantheon, which was Petra and a few other gods. When he found these dark elves coming about who were imprisoned, who may or may not have killed his father, by the way, we're not 100% sure there, we're still... he wanted to wield these magics. He thought this is his way of becoming more and more powerful. Then at one point he started discovering something which Skaven players are very accustomed to, Warpstone. And pretty much between dark magics and Warpstone, this is what we have now.
Yeah, pretty much. He's turned a little bit into a monstrosity, but look where he is now. He doesn't need friends or family. He's the one and unquestionable god of death in Age of Sigmar now, which I for one am very happy with. I'd much rather it be called Age of Nagash rather than Age of Sigmar, but then again, saying that, I probably wouldn't, because then I'd have to change my channel name for obvious reasons. But I much prefer Nagash then. I think he's got a lot more to his character.
He was absolutely great. Though, mind you, Sigmar as a person, he did a lot of interesting things. And I will eventually get that lore video done. It's going to be 5 hours. I'm almost done writing it. It's literally, I'm about 100,000 words in and I'm still not done. But like, these characters, they're fleshed out, and they deserve, like, the Sigmar fans deserve to know the background. They need to know what Nagash did. They need to know that he basically inherited the kingdom of gold in the land of sand type of thing,
Yeah, I mean, like, and we don't want to play ignorance. We're not saying that people listening to this don't already know this stuff, but there's some people who don't. So we just want to try and just give that sort of needed knowledge. I mean, there's some things you might hit. I mean, like, for me anyway, it's like Neferata is one of my favorite characters in Age of Sigmar, and this is purely because I watched a few lore videos about her on YouTube, and it's like, if I didn't know about this, I would just thought, oh, she's a pretty nice model. And this was me, like, in Age of Sigmar, so Age of Sigmar wasn't given that information, so that's why we need to basically do a sort of, it's almost like what we can do as small YouTube channels, like just give a little bit of SOS for those armies that really need it. And we're not saying if you're, an Age of Sigma player, or you're someone who, let's say you've got a huge Warriors of Chaos army, and you've gone into Age of Sigma, and you're a little bit annoyed that Age of Sigma happened, but you thought, I'll stay with Games Workshop on this. I'm sure my book will come at some point, and then 4 years later, your book hasn't came. You're still waiting, and you still haven't really received anything. We're not saying we're going to fix all your problems, obviously, because we can't do that, of course. But we can just give you something to listen to, just something to keep your interest in your army, and that's sort of what we're going for, really.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I don't play Sigma myself. Those who know my channel, I still play 8th. There are many games. Thankfully, there's a community down here, and we still play 8th. But I'm a 40k player too. And let's put it this way. I'm still waiting for Sisters of Battle. We're finally getting them, but...
They are coming.
I've been, I think it's in April for the release for the models. The mini codex is in chapter approved. But, I've wanted to play Sisters for a while. I've had to wait.
You like metal, don't you?
Pardon?
You don't mind if they're not in plastic, don't you?
Well, I prefer them in plastic.
Honestly. I'm joking. Yeah, it's been too long for them, certainly. And it's I don't play Sisters of Battle. I'll say there, but I would more than often welcome more plastic female models just for conversions and all that sort of thing.
Well, it's just I've got a sizable force of them in metal, but the problem is obviously they chip and so on, and as a hobbyist, that can be annoying. It's the same thing with resin models. I despise resin models.
I think metal is better than resin, and yes, I feel like metal chips more and stuff, but resin, you buy the model. Let's say you buy it online, it comes post and stuff, and then you get it, and I don't know, your character's got a spear, and the spear's bent, and I know you can sort of heat it up and bend it and all that, and put it back, but it's you're buying something. It shouldn't be damaged when it gets to you. Do you sort of see what I mean? Like it?
Oh, totally. I mean, when the Warhammer Legends came out for the Tomb Kings, where they brought out Cetra, I didn't have Cetra, so I needed Cetra. I wanted to have the King of Kings in hand, and
it's a medical condition. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's plastic crack, but
yeah.
The thing is, his wheels came bent, and I spent ages shaping the wheels back, which it is daunting, especially for players who are just new to the hobby and they're just seeing a bent out of shape model. They're like, maybe this is not for me.
Absolutely, that's their first impression of it. It's really not good, isn't it? And I think talking about the difference between our channels, that obviously you do fantasy, I do Age of Sigma. There's a lot of there's no way of hiding it. There's a lot of differences between them. There's a lot of difference in opinions between them as well. However, what we do have in common is that Age of Sigma is if you like it or not like it, it is the new fantasy, and Warhammer Fantasy is where it all started and how the love of Warhammer came from. And what we can do together is really try. Like I say, if you do fantasy, you do Age of Sigma. What we all have a common interest is making our hobby grow, making our community grow. Yep. As Warhammer became more popular, certainly over the last how many so years, but would still really like more people to do it and to get more people into it, because I don't know how to describe it, but it's just such a fantastic small community we have, and the bigger it grows, the better.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, we're in no way sponsored by GW. I have always said some negative stuff about them too, because there is always positives and there's always negatives. But I've been playing. I'm 26, right? I've been painting and playing Warhammer since I was 4 years old. Ever since my mother got me that first box of Ultramarines, I've loved this. I've loved it. 40k fantasy. I say it again. I've tried Sigma. It's just not for me. But there's still fantasy fans. They even, a massive chunk of the community went and did their own edition. There's an unofficial 9th, and it actually plays really well. You can see that people still have a lot of love for these characters. And honestly, I find Age of Sigma is a bit different to, well, it's completely different, let's face it. But there is a bridge, and there is a lot of love.
And I think I completely agree with you, and I think there really is a need for, a Games Workshop isn't going to do it. And when I mean there isn't going to do it, they seem to have already established they're a very abstract way of describing what happened between Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar, and they're not going near it again. Doesn't appear to be that way. So it sort of feels like it's up to us. And I know, like I've said, that obviously your channel's bigger than mine, but we're still quite small YouTube channels compared to some of the amazing big ones there are out there. But it sort of feels like it's sort of up to us to try and link the gap, because I might be completely wrong. There might be people doing it already, but I haven't. I've seen plenty of people talk about Warhammer Fantasy and plenty of people talk about Age of Sigmar, but I haven't really seen much of a positive link between them.
Well, I don't have a lot of positives, to be honest. But this is obviously coming from a person who, I've got almost 3,000 points worth of every other army. Some of them have like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of points. When I read that when I was reading the End Time series, and I knew where it was going, at that point I was like, ooh, I quit. I literally only just got back into the tabletop scene when I started the channel, because my heart sunk. Like, honestly, this is a place that I spent months and months sitting down in my early years with my mother and my father, painting with me too, because I'll post a picture eventually of that first Space Marine. I still have him. He looks horrible. But, like, no, seriously, like, wow, I did not know how to thin paints or anything, and he looks like he's screaming, kill me,
My first model, I was like, why put a brush on the model when you can just dunk the model in the paint pot and put it out, done. So that's literally it was a Seraphon, a Lizardman model in a fantasy. It was a Saurus warrior, and you could not see his scales. And I think he was like, brown or something. So it wasn't even like a blue color. Yeah, that was my first experience. So there's nothing to hide here.
They weren't great. Even when you'd start at GW and you'd go to the shops, they wouldn't really teach you how to paint and so on. Now, thankfully, they've got that Warhammer Community series with I think his name is Duncan, who does the how-to paints.
Yeah, you've got the Warhammer TV. Yeah, he's
he's pretty damn good. He's pretty damn good. Like, I do admit, I've actually used his videos a few times, because I'm looking at some of my models and I'm like, right, how do I get about this?
Yeah, it's like the longest model I've taken to paint, I've actually went through his tutorial, and that was my Archaon model on his big mount. And the tutorial, I believe, is like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And that Archaon model took me about 86 hours, I think, in total to paint. And that is, I'm not saying it's amazingly painted or anything like that, but it's because I try to get it painted as close as I could to the how it is in the box.
Yeah.
And that's the longest I'll ever paint a model. But it was really useful to have those tutorials. And it's not just the ones from Warhammer TV and Warhammer Community. There's also the lovely thing about what we have YouTube in today's life is that you have loads of channels that are literally dedicated to painting models and showing you how to do little tricks and tips and ways to, obviously not cheap painting models, because there is no such thing. There's just different techniques, and some things that, let's say you started painting an army and you've painted your first model, and you think, this is taking me absolutely ages, I'm not going to enjoy this because it's like a horde army and so on. And then you look up a painted tutorial and go, actually, this guy's painted them the same way I am, but it's taken him a tenth of the time because he's painted them like this. It's like the first time I discovered dry brushing, I was amazed, and that has saved my life so many times. It's just the community's really, really developed in the last, certainly since I've got into Warhammer. So I'm 23 and I got into when I was about 7. So, in the last that many years, it's just been up and up and up. And so it'd be quite nice. Like I say, there are definitely differences between our channels, but what we have in common is that it is in the fantasy side of Warhammer. And it'd just be nice to, because the one thing about Age of Sigmar as well is that they do sometimes mention the world that was, as it's called in Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Fantasy, but they sort of, I don't know if it's for copyright reasons or something, but they sort of shy away from it. Like, they don't mention it nearly as much as they could.
Yeah, no, it's copyright.
It is copyright, because there's like, they sort of brought the rules back in a little bit for the different bloodlines for the vampires, but they didn't call them the blood dragons, the necrarchs, the von Carstens, and so on. They call them names that are very similar to those names, but just different enough to annoy you and just sort of like not connect you back to it, which was a shame. And like, I don't want to shy away from the fantasy lore, because the fantasy lore is amazing, is what got me into Warhammer. But I'm not going to, say that I don't like Age of Sigmar, because I love Age of Sigmar. That's what got me back into Warhammer after the massive break, because of how easy I found it to get into, and because when I got back into Warhammer, I didn't have much money, so I could just buy a box of skeletons and I could start playing quite a few games. But there'll always be a part of me in fantasy, so it'd just be nice to sort of, like I have mentioned a few times, the bridging between fantasy and Age of Sigmar was not done well at all by Games Workshop. I don't think so. They did what they need to do, because I don't have the stats in front of me, but I've heard by quite a few people that since Age of Sigmar's happened, fantasy models are selling quite a lot. So they sort of, as a business, maybe they did what they had to do.
Yeah.
I don't know the secrets behind it, but maybe that's it.
I see it as that. Like, at the end of the day, they're a business. As much as I miss the old world, if they had to do it, they had to. But I still stand with a bunch of things. Like, as much as I understand that, because I myself work in a retail company and so on, let's put it this way. Bretonia hadn't had a book since 6th edition, even though we'd already been all the way to 8th and 8.5. Skaven were done on 7th, and I believe the same was for the Tomb Kings. What failed for them, in my mind, and in a lot of other players' minds, is they put a lot of focus into 40k. And if this is the case, I'm a bit worried for Sigmar too. Because what if it's the same case? Oh yeah, Sigmarine, but also look at Robute Gilliman. He's back in the 40k series. Space Marines.
Yeah, I mean, like, as a, like Age of Sigmar player, I will, of course, always, probably wrongly add to it, but I will always say that 40k definitely gets a lot more love than Age of Sigmar. And then there's probably people who play fantasy and not Age of Sigmar, and they probably think, well, how can you say that? At least your model lines and all those sorts of things still being supported. Of course, I understand that. But as I'm always going to say that the opposite one, which is 40k, always gets more love than me, because I'm, just going to be spoiled and say that. But it does feel that way, definitely. And then when Age of Sigmar does get released, I will add they've had a Night Goblin release lately, and the models I really like. So
same. They look great, and I tell you what, those original Night Goblins, they're like a 30-year-old cast. The fact that they finally updated them, that's what people wanted. I've actually bought a bunch of those boxes for my fantasy army, because now I can actually have goblins that look like goblins and not derps.
Exactly, and that's something I really liked to that release. Is there was a few like brand new models that did come out, but what I liked is that they literally, a lot of the models like Squidhoppers, and Fanatics, they just updated the models.
That's look gorgeous.
Exactly, and that's the sort of release that I really like. And unfortunately, like, I hate Stormcast, so the Sigmarines. If you're not into Age of Sigmar, you probably know them by that name. I hate them with a passion, mainly because when I first got into Age of Sigmar and there was no points, I was scarred by life from them, because it turns out for about a year until points came in, I was playing with a 1,300 point army against a 5,000 point army of Stormcast. So since then, I decorate every single base of my models with decapitated Stormcast. So I hate them more than most people, essentially. And it does seem like they always get a big release at least once a year, if not twice. And there's like some armies that really need a release, like I'll go again with the High Elf situation. I call them High Elves because I can't, in all honesty, remember every single one of their names now, because basically the High Elf army got hit with a hammer and broke into lots of little pieces. And I suppose that's cool if you like a really themed army. Like there's literally an army now of dragon princes and dragons, which if you really like that aspect, and you can take that, and your dragon princes are your battle line, so they're basically your core unit choice. So it's a functional army.
That's terrifying.
Not very good. Yeah, exactly. But however, how things have changed, it's like dragon princes. I know from playing, well, Total Warhammer, I suppose, like the only comparison I have. But I know from playing that, Dragon Princes are a really nasty cavalry unit. However, in Age of Sigma, as I believe they probably would have been called a extremely heavy cavalry unit. But in Age of Sigma, there's a lot more monstrous cavalry, so Dragon Princes aren't looked as being that amazing. Like Chaos Knights aren't bad, but they're comparing themselves up against something now called Vanguard, which are basically Chaos Knights on massive steroids.
They look freaking great. I actually have a box of those, and I use them as my Swords of Chaos for Archeon.
Well, your Vanguard.
Yeah, they look freaking awesome.
Yeah, I've bought them as well in the past, and people said like, oh, that's one of the other things when Age of Sigmar starts. Like, oh, how can they charge this much money for free models? And it's like, you get what you pay for. I mean, like, they're free models, but each one of them is like a bloody mounted hero. They're absolutely awesome. They're massive as well, and lovely. So yeah, I mean, like, this is, so like we said, this is our first video sort of talking about this and just sort of announcing what we'd like to do. So a little of it's a bit here and there and just sort of talking about our thoughts, but it's just great to hear your opinions as well, guys, after you've watched this video in the comments, just to see what you would like us to do with it. I'm sure you would agree, Nathan.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, this is something I'd like to explore into. Like, we've chatted about this for a while. I think you started messaging me about this prior to Christmas, no?
Yeah, I think it was at least a month ago. I think, because I listened to your lore stuff. I think the main one I got into was your Skaven, because you've got a lot of Skaven lore videos.
I love my rats, man. I love my rats.
I mean, like, I'm not going to say that I've been with Skaven since the start. I haven't. I've always loved the lore behind them, but I'm new to them, so I'm not going to say like I've been doing them since the start. As I absolutely hate when people say that about death and it's not true, or vampire counts. But after listening to your videos and stuff, I was like, yeah, this is definitely your channel and stuff. I was like, it'd be absolutely amazing, to work with you and to see what sort of stuff we can accomplish, really, because it's always nice to do videos with another person, because you also get to bounce thoughts with each other, and it'd be pretty cool. And I'm a little bit knowledgeable about Warhammer Fantasy, and for me, because I'm a little bit knowledgeable about it, I would like to dive more into knowledge and learn a lot from it, and I think that everyone will learn something. It will be quite nice.
Yeah, it should be cool. I mean, I'd like to see, like, I've seen your videos, your lore videos and so on, and it is interesting. I was like, oh wow, that's changed, because obviously now, everything is completely changed, and I like seeing the little what's still there, like the whole Flesh Eater Court stuff. A lot of it's changed, but there's a bit of a distinction back. Yeah. And with the Night Haunt stuff, a lot of people think, oh, they're really new, but they were the Khan race and stuff like that, the Banshees. So it's actually quite interesting to look at your videos and go, okay, cool. So they did keep this, at least,
Yeah, I do my best, that sort of stuff. It's like I try and focus on the armies that don't have loads of love, and unfortunately, that's at the moment, death has become really popular in Age of Sigma. And when I say death, guys, it means basically the vampire counts where they are now. It became really popular in Age of Sigma, and that's sort of annoying because I don't really like really popular armies, so I'm going to have to go to a new, different army. But until that point when it became popular, I was doing like lore videos on like what's called the Dead Walkers, and basically that's the part of the vampire count army which are your zombies. So your zombies. Your direwolves and your corpse cut. That's basically got put into one army. It's not a very good army. As you might be able to tell, as there's like no wizards or anything in it, and it's a death army. However, I did over a half-an-hour video talking about those three units, trying to give as much lore as I could. Basically, this is at the sort of near the start of Age of Sigma as well, so basically as much lore as I could scrape from the barrel, sort of give some love to those armies, because in Age of Sigma anyway, there's like I said, there's big popular armies, and there's loads of really good YouTube channels that talk really in depth about the popular armies, and I sort of just feel like it'd be quite nice to talk about the ones that and when I say popular, I mean like the new armies. It'd be quite nice to talk about some of the older armies and remind you that they did have some epic tales back in fantasy, and to just in case you weren't aware of them, Like this, I'm sure there's loads of stories that I'm unaware of what happened in fantasy. It'd just be great to dive in and explore them, from my point of view, anyway.
I'm still learning stuff, honestly. I've been very lucky where I've had a lot of support. A subscriber who lives quite close to me was kind enough to donate a book from second edition, and I'm learning a lot of stuff from that book. Stuff that I didn't know. A lot of stuff that's been retconned or just never gets mentioned again. Perfect example would be the Chaos Gods of Law, where there are 3 Chaos Gods who actually believe in law and order, yet nobody knew about them. In the end times, Archeon actually asks, I'm not even sure if this character's in Age of Sigmar anymore, Belako?
No, he's not an Age of Sigmar.
That's a shame.
Well, he hasn't got a model anyway.
He was great, honestly. But he asks him directly, oh, what about the Chaos Gods of Law? And he actually goes, oh, they never existed. It's like, excuse me? We had a comic series devoted to them.
Yeah, it's well, exactly. It's like a place I never even knew about and stuff, or knew what was there and stuff. Is one of the videos I watched. I think I put a comment. Is it the Dragon Isles?
Yeah.
Dragon Isle. Yeah, it's like basically I've got a map of the old world in my bedroom, and yeah, sure I see it on that. And so I watched that video. I think it was a short video. It was like, oh my god, I never knew any of that stuff there. That's really cool, and that's one of the things what Age of Sigmar's missing at the start, was basically instead of there being a world like where fantasy was based, it's the mortal realms. So every realm is based off one of the winds of magic that there was in fantasy. So there'll be a realm of death, there'll be a realm of life, there'll be a realm of metal, and so on. And the problem was, it's like, okay, so it's quite abstract, but it's like trying to get your head around it. And like if you could speak to GW, it'd be like, right, okay, I'm behind your idea here, but what do these realms look like? If you got a map, is it a planet? Is it a floating continent in space? Is it this or that? And then they're like, oh yeah, we don't really know. And it's like, help me help you. I'm trying to buy your product. Tell me what it's all about. But now in the new edition of Age of Sigmar, because Age of Sigmar has gone into a second edition now, and the game is a lot more structured since when it first came out. And in the structured new edition, they've also put a lot more effort into the lore, and they've actually drawn up quite a few maps. They say this is what a realm looks like, this is where they are, and it just really gives you that sort of depth you need to sort of be able to feel like you can immerse yourself into Age of Sigmar, rather than when it first came out. It's like the lore doesn't make any sense, so I don't know how I'm on it. That has changed. So what I would say is that if you looked at Age of Sigmar when it first came out and you got put off by it, and I don't blame you, because it was some parts of it were a mess back then. I do encourage you to even if just give it a second or something, just have another look to see what's changed, because like I say, there's still some tweaks that definitely need to be made, but a lot has changed in 4 years, and Games Workshop has learned a lot, and they're doing their best to fix it, and they've gone quite a long way up to now. So if you looked at it at the start of Age of Sigmar, have another look. You might still not like it, can't guarantee anything like that, but it's like, because I still hear some people say like, well, Age of Sigmar's stupid because there's no points in it. Well, there are points now. There's been points for about 2-3 years, so it's just like, but you still might not like it. But it's worth having a look at, because as like I say, the lore's not all there and all that sort of thing. There are actually some bits of lore that are really quite cool and interesting, and they've done some things with like the witch elves and stuff like that in the Dark Elf army, and like, you might not like this, but they have actually become basically their own army with the Sisters of Slaughter, and they've got some new models, and the Doom Warlocks, I think they're called, who ride the horses. Basically, they've turned that into a whole army. They've added a new model to it, and Marathi's got a big new model, and so that's like another aspect, like the witch elves and those sort of cults. They had sure they did have some lore and fantasy, but now they've been given the whole new army. They've got a whole army book explaining their lore. They're telling them like where they came from, all that sort of thing. So it's basically swings and roundabouts. So yeah, there's a lot of armies that are still needing that lore update of what's happened to them. But then there are some armies that never had an amazing, huge amount of lore, and now they've got more than they did. Which those occasions are rare, but it does happen.
Well, the witch elves themselves, back then in the days of fantasy, they had their own. Well, they got retconned a few times because originally
Oh, okay, fair one.
the cult of pleasure was actually a Slaneshi cult, and it can be attributed to the whole civil war between the elves and the Sundering of Ulthuan. Could have actually been because of Slanesh, but then got changed a while. Turns out Morathi and her cult are just very sadistic followers. I believe it was of Cain, which okay, a god of war, but yeah, they took it a little bit extra. It's just a lot did change. The thing with fantasy is they had a lot of lore for a lot of things, and they had to kind of ignore certain parts. Like there's countries like Nippon, Cathay, and Ind, which are like our modern day our versions of Japan, China, and India. But they had like little to no lore. As far as we knew, one of them was called the Dragon Emperor, and during the end times, a beastman with I think he had a tiger's head took over Ind. That's literally all we got in terms of information during the end times. It's like,
And that's about. I'm trying to look at the map now. Is that's about a third of the world, isn't it?
pretty much.
That sort of region.
Yeah.
It's a huge chunk. Bear in mind how big the old world is in comparison.
Yeah, they literally just ignored that. Same thing with, Albion itself is a magical place, even like extremely magical by fantasy standards. Time went slowly there, and the Amazons in Lustria, nobody really knows much about them. I did a little video on the Colchians, which are pretty much like dodos there, but people responded to that quite quickly, going, "Oh, what is this?" It's like, I told you, it's something that got 2 lines of lore and then just was never looked at again.
Yeah, which is a almost a shame, really, isn't it? And especially how GW's moved on now into Age of Sigma. Will it get explored? Probably not. That's what gives me hope for Total War Warhammer. They have the potential to explore these things, like the Vampire Coast DLC that came out for Total War Warhammer.
That was great.
That was great, and a lot of the units are like Forge World units, and some of them were never made.
Yeah.
And so they really sort of made up their own army roster, which was I know there was.
That's the
There
funny
was
thing.
a army roster at one point, wasn't there? Or something?
Yeah, in White Dwarf. Because I remember sitting down and talking to some people, and they were like really angry. It's like, oh, really? We get the Vampire Coast? They didn't have a book. It's like, yeah, but they had a roster. Like, Harkin was established. Like, it wasn't the best roster ever. Like, it was like probably about 9 units. But it was decent enough to play with. I think that was for 7th edition, though. Might have been 7th.
Yeah, I think. I wouldn't have been there at that time, but I remember hearing that they were saying White Dwarf. But it's also came off Dreadfleet as well, hasn't it? This expansion.
Yeah, Dreadfleet. That's funny enough. Aranessa Saltspite. She's a member of the Dreadfleet, and obviously Count Noctilus is the leader. A lot of people don't know, and I'm actually really glad I did the lore video on that. Count Noctilus is actually called Nikolaus von Karstein. Many people don't know that. It's actually really interesting. And it's like, I loved it. The idea of being, like, the moment I got the DLC, the literal moment I just started a Dreadfleet campaign, because I was like, yes, I really wanted to play this guy. I've got these Dreadfleet, the models. I've played the game. I love the idea of being able to play, this self-professed pirate lord who, yeah, fine, he wasn't all right in the head. But then again, if you compare him to Harkin, he's actually quite sane.
Yeah, he is, isn't he? Harkin is a bit. I haven't played him in Total War yet, but I seem to remember when I looked at his like abilities, like when you look to start a new campaign, one of the abilities was like, I can't remember what it's called, but it was like the many minds of his character or something. So I have no idea what that means, but he's
Yeah, he lost his mind raiding a Lizardman temple.
Is it Lizardman artifact?
Yeah, and so much so that during the end times, this is literally because Nagash actually elevated him to a Monarch. So it's not just Arkan, Neferata, and Manfred as they believe. Luthor Harkin is one of them too. There's a lot of them who are like one of the. I believe they're called Montarchs or Motarchs or something like that.
Yeah, Mortox.
Yeah, so he was actually elevated to that. He was the Motarch of Death. And during the end, where they're fighting in Sylvania, where Isabella von Karstein was possessed by a demon, he's in the battlefield, literally picking flowers.
He reminds me of Conrad a little bit.
Yeah, well, in a much safer sense, you'd probably be safer with Harkin than Conrad, because Conrad would probably decapitate you and eat you.
Yeah, he most certainly ruled by fear.
Those vampires were great.
Yeah, the vampire counts were amazing. Yeah, it's things like that make me obviously do really like the lore of the old world, and sort of like wish it was still there in Age of Sigmar. And there are things like Manfred, who is in the realm of death, obviously because he is one of Nagash's Mortarchs, and he's basically like like the third most powerful like death figure there is in Age of Sigmar. And so because of his power, he's given his own part of the realm of death, which he's made a mock-up of the what used to be the Empire. And basically the reason why he's done this is so he can be the Emperor, something he always wanted to be in fantasy, and now can actually live it in this sort of like fake twisted version of it, which to me sounds pretty cool, because he's got everything he ever wanted, but it feels fake to him. But for me, I'm like, that sounds really cool. I want to sort of like dive into that, this, that, and other. Like, if he's like made his own version of the Empire, but he's the Emperor, what does it look like? And they don't dive into it. It's just they sort of skim the surface. So there are interesting parts there. They just need to dive into them, I find.
I'm quite glad they've continued making Manfred a spoilt boy. That actually makes me happy.
There's actually I was gonna say there's some, like I say, parts of the lore are missing Age of Sigmar. There's actually are some really good audible dramas, and there's one where I think it's called the Mortarch of Night, which Manfred is, and that's a 8 audio drama series, and 8-part, and I've got them all, and it's really good. It's Manfred. It basically summarizes how his character hasn't changed, and there's some betrayals involved and alliances made and broken, and it's all about Manfred's own survival, and that's really quite cool to see. And those stories, like I say, an 8-part series just basically about Manfred. It's those sorts of things that like still link you to the characters.
Yeah,
which is really well, I won't say what happens just in case any of you guys listen. I would definitely recommend it. It's a really good series, sure.
Yeah, those books are quite good, and it's good that they're still releasing them. It's and they're continuing the story. Funny enough, they're also releasing Warhammer Fantasy books still under the name Chronicles, and
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
that the guys behind Warhammer have been creating their own established lore too. Like I keep forgetting her name, Diaphyn. The fat Bretonian woman.
Oh, okay.
She's a fully made up character, and I'm actually quite pleased about that, because it's like they're actually keeping the lore going. It's lore friendly. Yeah, we do have undead Bretonians and stuff like that. Like, some people were like, yeah, but we could have had this guy or this guy. It's like, yeah, but isn't this like the spiritual successor to Warhammer Fantasy?
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to see it continue on, isn't it? And for it not to be
No, definitely.
For just trying to think of the way to describe it. For them to, there's still something there rather than them just cutting it off completely.
No, definitely.
Which they could do, because obviously it's their own stuff. But yeah, so I think that's probably it for the video. Have you got anything else you'd like to?
No, we're all cool. Like, I just want to say to everyone, like, this video will be posted in 2 areas. It will be posted on my channel, obviously, and on the Age of Nagash. So if you're listening to Age of Nagash, if you're interested in Warhammer Fantasy, please check out the Great Book of Grudges. And if you're on my channel listening to this, and you're interested in the changes in Age of Sigmar, what Nagash is up to nowadays, you know, he is a god of death, and I don't think he's changed too much. He's still quite the evil guy. Check out the Age of Nagash.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Nagash is still very much evil. His plan is to basically Sigma wants to unite the mortal realms and to defeat chaos. You know, no surprise there. He's boring. But he wants to unite it under his rule. You know, obviously this order he wants to impose. So I don't really feel like he's too different to Nagash. Because like, you could say Nagash, you know, resurrects the dead and you know forces souls to fight for him. However, Sigma, how he makes his Stormcast Sigma Marines is by reforging the souls of heroes into these armor, basically. So he's sort of not letting souls be able to rest in peace as well as Nagash. So I actually think Nagash and Sigma aren't too different, and Nagash actually is the only potential person, well, you know, god who could wipe out chaos, because if he destroys all life on the planet, sorry, I say the planet, I mean all life in the mortal realms, he could, and all put them under his will. He's got a good chance of wiping out chaos, because if there's no free will anymore, the chaos powers can't really feed off any of this energy that they rely on, apart from, you know, Nagash's, and you could argue that Nagash would be huge by that point. But yeah, I feel like Nagash is the only real chance to defeat chaos, and Sigma's trying to deny it. So I personally feel like Nagash is the good guy, Sigma's the evil one, and every Stormcast that burns is a good Stormcast.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, that's a long tangent. But anyway, if you're listening on my channel and you're interested in the lore of Warhammer Fantasy, and I say if you're interested, I mean it should be, it's amazing, especially if you're only know a little bit about it, or you know a lot. Get yourself over to the Great Book of Grudges, and I'm sure you'll see some stuff on there that you won't see anywhere else. Some really fun, interesting things. And yeah, like I say, I've enjoyed very much making this video, as this is our first video together. Hopefully everything's going to be okay, the equality and stuff, but this is like our first time working out how we're going to do joint videos, so apologies if the sound quality isn't good, but I think it sounded okay. Yeah. And yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching this video, and like I said, the Great Book of Grudges.
So yeah, your mic just literally died just there. It just happens. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. We shall see you all very, very soon, and have a good day.